Let's go Broncos! This is one of those moments in the NFL season where everything seems fine on the surface, but underneath, there's a crack that could completely open up at the worst possible time. I'm talking about a detail that opposing quarterbacks have certainly noticed, that coaches across the league are already studying, and that could decide whether the Denver Broncos will be playing football in February, or watching from the couch. And before I explain this, if you're a true Denver Broncos fan, click the like button. This helps this video reach more Broncos fans and shows me that you care about this team as much as I do. And I also want to know your opinion, so leave a comment saying go Broncos, and tell me if you believe this roster is truly prepared to survive the playoffs. Now let's get straight to the point. PJ Locke's performance against the Jacksonville Jaguars raised major red flags. This isn't about emotion or narratives, it's about what the film shows. Communication issues were evident, coverage wasn't tight, and there were moments where opposing players simply overpowered him. One of the most glaring examples came on a touchdown pass to tight end Brenton Strange, where PJ Locke looked overwhelmed and outmatched. The back end of the defense did not operate cleanly, and while this wasn't a problem created by one player alone, PJ Locke was right in the center of it. It's important to be fair here. The entire secondary struggled outside of Pat Certain too. Jaquan McMillian missed tackles. Riley Moss missed tackles and gave up explosive plays. This wasn't a one-man collapse. But when you're evaluating who should be on the field in the playoffs, excuses don't matter nearly as much as results. PJ Locke finished the game with 6 tackles, but the advanced analytics paint a much uglier picture. He was targeted 9 times, allowed an average depth of target of 17 yards per throw, and earned a coverage grade of 33.3. That combination is the definition of vulnerability at the safety position. Yes, Trevor Lawrence played well. There's no denying that. He's a former number 1 overall pick for a reason, and he's capable of dissecting defenses when given opportunities. But that's exactly the point. When you line up next to Pat Certain too, opposing quarterbacks are not going to test him often. Instead, they look to the other side of the field. That's what Lawrence did. Certain was targeted just once. Meanwhile, Riley Moss was targeted 28.5% of the time, and PJ Locke 21.4%. Nearly half of all targets went in their direction. That is not sustainable football when you're about to face elite quarterbacks week after week in January. And that's the reality Broncos country needs to face. This problem isn't going away. In the coming weeks, the Broncos could be staring down quarterbacks like Josh Allen, C.J. Stroud, Justin Herbert, or even Drake May. These players will see exactly what Trevor Lawrence saw. If one side of the field is locked down, they will relentlessly attack the other. That means any weakness in the secondary becomes a flashing target. The evaluation period is over. This isn't week 3 anymore. This is the stretch where you put the best possible players on the field, period. Based on what we've seen, it's fair to question whether PJ Locke should continue getting meaningful defensive snaps. There are internal options to explore, including adjusting alignments and personnel packages, but there's also a much louder external option that keeps coming up for a reason. Justin Simmons. He's been in Denver recently, he knows the system, and his football intelligence and communication skills are something this secondary is clearly missing right now. Even if he hasn't played all season, his past production, coverage instincts, and leadership could stabilize a unit that is showing cracks at the worst possible time. This isn't about nostalgia. It's about survival. The film shows communication breakdowns that simply cannot happen in the playoffs. There was a 25-yard gain against Jacksonville where confusion before the snap was obvious, and Trevor Lawrence recognized it instantly. He clapped for the snap, attacked the flat, and turned it into a big play. That's high-level quarterbacking punishing low-level execution. In January, those mistakes end seasons, because this is where the margin for error completely disappears. Once you reach the postseason, you don't get the luxury of saying we'll clean it up next week. One busted assignment, one late rotation, one missed communication between the nickel and the safety, and your season can be over in a matter of seconds. That's why this conversation feels so urgent right now. It's not about tearing down a player for the sake of criticism. It's about identifying a weakness before an elite quarterback exploits it when everything is on the line. What really stands out when you go back through the Jacksonville film isn't just the missed tackles or the yards allowed, it's the hesitation. You see moments where PJ Locke is thinking instead of reacting. You see him drifting into space instead of attacking it. And at the NFL level, especially in playoff football, hesitation is fatal. Quarterbacks live for that split second of doubt. Trevor Lawrence absolutely did. He recognized confusion pre-snap. He saw defenders talking instead of being set, and he accelerated the tempo to take advantage. That's not an accident. That's a smart quarterback attacking a vulnerable secondary. And this is where Pat Certain two's greatness becomes a double-edged sword. Because he's so dominant, offenses actively avoid him. That means the rest of the secondary has to hold up under pressure, snap after snap. When they don't, the defense becomes predictable. Opposing coordinators know exactly where the ball is going, and elite quarterbacks are more than happy to oblige. When nearly half of all targets are going at Riley Moss and PJ Locke, that tells you everything you need to know about how offenses view this matchup. This is why the idea of bringing in Justin Simmons keeps resurfacing. Not because he's a magic fix, but because he brings something this group desperately needs right now: clarity. Communication at the safety position isn't just about knowing your assignment, it's about making sure everyone else knows theirs. Simmons has done that at a high level for years. He understands leverage, route combinations, and how to disguise coverage without sacrificing structure. Even if his legs aren't what they were at their peak, his football IQ alone could prevent the kinds of breakdowns that showed up against Jacksonville. There's also the mental side of playoff football that doesn't show up in box scores. Young or inexperienced defensive backs can tighten up when the stakes rise. Veterans tend to simplify the game. They calm the chaos. They get everyone lined up and ready before the snap. When you watch that 25-yard gain where confusion was obvious and the offense took advantage immediately, that's exactly the type of play that experienced playoff teams eliminate. Not because they're more talented, but because they're more prepared. The Broncos have worked too hard this season to let something like this derail them now. Injuries have already taken their toll. Depth has been tested. The margin is thin. That's why standing pat and hoping for improvement is a risky gamble. Maybe PJ Locke bounces back. Maybe the communication improves. But hope isn't a strategy in January. Preparation is. And preparation sometimes means making uncomfortable decisions, even if they're only temporary solutions. And there's another layer to this that Broncos country can't afford to ignore, and it has everything to do with trust. Defensive football, especially in the secondary, is built on trust. Trust that the guy next to you will be where he's supposed to be. Trust that if you pass off a route, someone else is picking it up. When that trust starts to crack, everything slows down. You hesitate, you second guess, and that's when explosive plays happen. What showed up against Jacksonville was not just poor execution, it was uncertainty, and uncertainty spreads fast on defense. Sean Payton and Vance Joseph are veterans. They know exactly what they're seeing on film. They know that playoff opponents will copy and paste what worked for Trevor Lawrence. They'll use motion, tempo, and misdirection specifically to stress communication on the back end. If that issue isn't addressed now, it will be weaponized later. This is the chess match part of football, and right now the Broncos have a piece on the board that opposing teams believe they can attack repeatedly. That's why this decision matters so much. It's not about overreacting to one game, it's about responding intelligently to what the league is telling you. The film doesn't lie. The targeting patterns don't lie. The communication breakdowns don't lie. Every contender that makes a deep playoff run does one thing exceptionally well. They eliminate obvious weaknesses before January exposes them. The Broncos still have time to do that, but the window is closing fast. So as this team prepares for the most important games of the season, the front office and coaching staff have to ask themselves one hard question. Are they willing to make a proactive move to protect this defense? Or are they comfortable betting the season on improvement that hasn't shown up on tape yet? Broncos country, this is the moment where tough choices define how far this team can really go. What do you think should happen next? And this is where everything comes together, because seasons like this don't fail loudly at first. They fail quietly, through small details that get ignored until it's too late. One missed rotation, one late adjustment, one safety who doesn't fully recognize what's coming before the snap. That's how playoff runs end, not with blowouts, but with moments that flip momentum and never give it back. What we saw on film against Jacksonville wasn't just a bad afternoon, it was a glimpse of what disciplined, aggressive playoff teams will try to force every single week. The Broncos are close. That's what makes this conversation uncomfortable but necessary. The foundation is strong. The coaching staff knows how to win. The defense has elite pieces, but postseason football has no mercy for weak links. If opposing quarterbacks believe they know exactly where to go with the ball, they will test it over and over again until something breaks. And once that confidence sets in, it's almost impossible to take it back within a game. That's the danger zone the Broncos are approaching right now. This is the point in the season where front offices and coaching staffs separate contenders from pretenders. Contenders anticipate problems and solve them early. Pretenders hope the problem fixes itself. The tape is already out there. The targeting trends are already obvious. The question now isn't whether teams will attack this area of the defense. It's whether Denver will do something about it before January football exposes it under the brightest light.